Hey guys, this is Wolf of Tin Street over at mtgband.com. I've been working on some really cool new forecasting measures that you can utilize to predict buy list values going forward into the future. So I really quickly just wanted to do. I say quickly, things with never are never going to be quickly with me. But I wanted to do a quick walkthrough and a slight comparison to the new methodology and the old methodology. So I'll try and keep the technical things brief because I know that's going to bore the tears out of most people. However, so if we go over and we're going to look at the old forecasting methodology, this is looking at the number of sellers for a particular card on TCG. And I think if you look at this long enough, you're going to see it's not a very useful thing. It's just not good enough. And I'll explain why. This was utilizing three relatively basic time series models and algorithms to look forward. But the most important thing is I was only looking at historical number of vendors to predict future number of vendors, which leaves a lot of information out, which you really need to take into account. I mean, what were the buy list offers behind it? What was the market value? What was the sales rate? All of these elements really do play a factor from a market setting. And then also when you want to compare it to other cards, are black cards moving more? Are black cards in standard moving more? All of these really do add to the complexity and trying to forecast out how a card is going to perform and change in a marketplace over time. So with that understood, and also just being very disappointed with the usability of this style of forecasting, I got a little bit more complex. So I went from three rudimentary methods to 13 different algorithms or models, which utilize machine or deep learning, depends on the model, to really add oomph, really add some accuracy and really bringing it more into the modern era. And I do that because all of these algorithms that I'm using are now going to take advantage of mana cost, card types, colors, number of printings, and how those number of printings might change. So if it gets reprinted, that's going to affect the time series. The EDH rec value, that value changes over time, so that's going to play an impact. The buy list values, does that go up or down, and how is that behaving over time? The buy list quantity, how many are they willing to accept over at Card Kingdom, the market value, the number of sellers. On top of that, the TCG sales ranks or the Card Kingdom sales ranks. All of this information is actually readily available, whether it's from the websites themselves or you have to go over to mtgjson.com. I would highly recommend anybody from a technical aspect head over to that website. It's going to make your life a whole lot easier, and I really do rely on it a great deal for everything I do. So with that little bit of a very earned shill out of the way, um, after I run these 13 algorithms utilizing all of those different metrics, we select the best five performing. So first we run them, and then we basically let the machine tune it up, try and pick the best, most accurate values. Then we further refine it by picking the best five performing models and combine them into one to try and reduce, basically to try and improve accuracy. And once we have it there, we will apply that new, basically, I don't want to call it a super algorithm, but really strong algorithm across all of these different cards to get our new forecast values. And really what this has done, I've already seen it here, is it's remarkable. The accuracy is just much better, and we'll get to that when we go down to forecast performance, I believe. But it's something that I'm really proud of, and I really want to show off here. So if we go back to this old forecasting methodology, so I would show you the number of vendors or today's buy list, what it was today, what I expect it to be tomorrow, in 3 days, in 5 days, and in 7 days, next week's vendors. And then I would give you the plus or minus for the confidence range. But again, if you look at I wasn't using enough information. It sucks. It just sucks. So if we go over to buy list growth forecast, this is the new kind of view that I want to show off. And so just to go over the field names here real quick, we've got card name, edition, and card number. This is a very important field now that WotC prints 7 different versions of each card with the extended foil, the promos, the non-foils. The list goes on. You really do need that card number to really pick out the specific card we're looking at. And what I'm going to do is show you the most recent buy list offer on this card. Now, I've labeled this most recent because, as I mentioned, this algorithm, this style of forecasting is way more complex. So it takes 12 to 14 hours with the computer that I have to run this forecast on 2,000 cards, versus this old one, I would run it for 8 hours across 50,000 plus cards. So we are really reducing our sample pool, our pool of cards that we're analyzing, but we are really improving the accuracy on those cards. And I arrived at that shortlist, by the way, by taking advantage of this top 25 singles page, which I can go into on a later date. But just to give you a little context on how I arrived at those cards. Also, another important disclaimer: I did exclude old school cards because they behave vastly different. They deserve their own forecasting measure. I would have to change a lot in the algorithm to make it more pertinent for their style of growth and decline, because they really do behave far differently from the rest of the market. So with all of that said, we get to, once again, our most recent buy list was $1.30. So historically, this card does not tend to be very active. In fact, the offer most tendered for this card is $1.60. And I say it like that because we don't want to look at the average here, because the average is very sensitive. So if this card has $1.60 as its median value, it could have been sitting at $1.60 for 60 to 80 days, and then somebody could send in 500 copies and it craters the value down to 25 cents. And if you were to take the average after another 60 to 80 days, it would look much lower than what the actual average value is, assuming that it continues to fluctuate a little bit around that 25-cent mark. So to kind of stabilize the value and to show you really what you can most often expect, I went with the median. Again, I can talk more about that later, but I think that's sufficient for now. So we know that the historical offer on this card is most likely to be $1.60. It's not likely to move up or down much. However, today, or at least our most recent buy list value, shows that it actually did go down 30 cents. So this is already acting outside the normal. But we can see too, the historical max matches the historical median. So this card has been at max offer for a very long time. So it's never gone higher than $1.60, but that's where it's been sitting. So the fact that it's now gone down should raise an eyebrow. Even though it's only 30 cents, it does raise an eyebrow. And so when I ran my algorithms across this, it is now forecasting that this card should arrive at a buy list offer of $2.20 by January 18th of 2021. And as I'm recording this, it's January 10th of 2018, or 2018, dear Lord, of 2021. So basically, I'm predicting it's got 8 days to get there. And then I'm ranking this an S tier, which is the highest tier. So we've got tier S, which is the top tier, A, B, C, D, and so on. And we'll break into that too. And this entire tier system is based on a box plot. So if you've ever looked at a box plot, I think it's worthy of another video. Basically how impressive is this forecast? And by my calculations and my ranking system, this is incredibly impressive. This card has been sitting at its max value for a long time, and the current has begun to decline a little bit. However, all of the other sales information that we've been looking at, including the sets of legality, its EDH rec rank, the number of sellers, its market value, the number of copies they want, all of these other indicators are indicating that even though the buy list has gone down today, it should recover, essentially. So you can interpret it as it should go up, or my algorithm is a little too slow and it might go down. However, I would advocate, and I'll show you this too on the performance, that if it gets an S tier, I'm going to buy into this card. Now, behavior is something that's also important. So this would make me pause a little bit. So I mentioned earlier, if somebody sends in a ton of cards, it can really mess with measures. But the median is an insensitive measure, which means it's really hard to mess with what the median offer is. It's very easy to mess with the mean. So for those of you who might be somewhat familiar with stats, I'll just tell you this is a logistic measure. This is looking at, is the standard deviation greater than the IQR? And if it is, it's going to be labeled a volatile card. There's movement here, up or down, that you should be aware of. This card is seeing attention for whatever reason, which means Just take it with a grain of caution. Essentially, this card is fluctuating a little bit too much right now to be just like a bona fide, like, oh, it's slowly climbing up, it's moving in the right direction, yada yada yada. This would make me pause and think I need to dig into this. And the first thing that I think when I see this, okay, it's volatile, and it's in a standard set, a standard legal set, and a recently printed set. I mean, I would expect that card to be kind of volatile on the Card Kingdom buy list if you just think about it that way. So, kind of important to take into account. Now, if you look at the one right underneath it, we'll have Necropotence out of Eternal Masters. Most recent buy list is 22. Historically, it goes up or down 3.5 with an average offer of 18.5. So that means we are on the upper bound limit of what we would expect this card to be historically. Because if we add 3.5 to 18.5, that's 19 plus 3. That's going to get us to 22. And there we go. So we are on the upper limit of what we've seen this card behave at historically, again, in the past 180 days. And the algorithm is saying that it's going to go up even further to 2370, which is beyond the historical max. So it has reached the $23 point before in our time period. And we are basically predicting that not only is it going to reach that historical max again, it's probably going to surpass it. You'll see here there is this plus minus column, which gives basically a 95% confidence range, which you could really read into this and say, maybe not. That's a pretty big confidence region for this card. However, if you're just looking straight up at the numbers, this is, again, a card that looks like, historically, it's been at a lower offer. It's still within the realm of what we would expect it to be at, although the upper realm. We see the max isn't too far off, and we're expecting it to surpass that. So when I read this, or as I read it, actually, to be honest with you, for the first time, this is a card that probably, unless it sees another reprint, I would expect it to continue to climb. And again, we expect it to hit this buy list value of $23 by January 22nd of 2021. So we are forecasting a month ahead here, a full month. And I'm going to pull out the day that it is expected to hit its max forecasted buy list. Very important to note. So before we were only looking at a week, and because I was only looking at a week, I would only show you as many of those days as I thought was pertinent to kind of tell a story. Now, due to basically how much information I'm generating outside of our forecast when we forecast a full month ahead, and also due to the fact that Magic is printing so many cards so quickly, I felt that this was a better methodology, because if they print a secret lair tomorrow or something or the other, or make an announcement that Necropotence will be in Cal time as of recording, those are spoilers coming out, we would really want that to impact tomorrow's forecast as soon as possible, and it will. Of course, when we get to forecast performance, it's still going to reflect poorly on me, which is what I want. And again, so now this one will be our first in tier A. I'll be honest with you, S tiers are really far and few between, so I was really glad that we got one today so I could talk about it. But the other thing too we'll see here is it's not volatile. So this card looks to be growing. It does not look to have any interference yet from anybody who might be like holding on to a stack, whether that's because the folks holding on to the stack just haven't realized that it's growing yet, and we have. But it seems to be relatively untouched spec, at least from the buy list side, that I would feel comfortable trying to get in on, so long as I could get in around this buy list offer, which I know is not always easy, but I think it's really, really cool that we can do this, and we can do it with a decent degree of confidence. Like Xancha Sleeper Agent, I believe I called Shameless, shill right here, band spec performance when we call out our specs. I believe I called this one back out December 15th as spiking. It had gone from $2 in early November up to $5, and my forecast was predicting that it would go up to $7 or $8 at the time. And when I called it, I actually got really sad because it fell back down to about $2 or $3 for a couple of days, and then recently it's shot back up to $7. So that to me makes me very happy to see that's been playing out in my forecast. The same story with Regal Behemoth. Polluted Bonds I would expect to be on here somewhere. That's another one that we see very often. Deflecting Swat is another big one. And it really does kind of give you this massive advantage, I think, over the rest of the market, because if you can find a card with a high enough dollar range, and keep in mind, these are buy list values. And oftentimes these buy list values will surpass the market value because the volatility on the buy list side, which is controlled by a single entity, allows for a lot more change, a lot more chaos, basically, just to happen compared to the open market, which you'd find on TCG. So by looking at this, we can really see things moving basically underneath the surface of the ocean. Kind of see the currents moving, and really it provides you an avenue to either make money off the buy list itself or position yourself to buy into a card like Xantia when it fell back down to $2.40 or 75 cents on the buy list. You could make an offer for everybody's Xantias on that day for $4, look like a genius, or look like you're paying way too much, and now you've just made $3 a copy, and you can tell everybody that you got lucky. Humble brag. You totally you could have never seen it coming. So that is something that I'm really enjoying about doing this. And again, this forecast does update daily, which is kind of crazy, but it really does provide a level of just constantly updating with all of the information, all of the elements that we can to try and keep up to date with Magic's market, which is kind of crazy to think, but that is kind of what they're doing to us now in the secondary market. So this is my attempt to kind of keep up and keep pace with them. So the last slide that I want to talk about would be the forecast performance. So I am a big proponent of, if I'm going to tell you guys that it's going to go from this to this, I should be held accountable if it doesn't. And even if it doesn't, to whatever degree that I'm off by, I need to tell you. And it gets a little complicated because I'm running this forecast every day and I'm picking this date. So I could have pulled Glass Pool Mimic yesterday, could have shown up in my forecast as a B tier spec, as a B tier on the forecasting scale. And it could have said it would reach its 1.6 by January 16th instead of 18th. So how do I pick basically which element to tell you guys how I perform? Because I could pick the same card 12 times, and obviously I could go ahead and choose the card that basically minimizes the damage to me and shows you that I picked it at 22, said it would go to basically 24, and maybe today it's actually only 20. So I was off by $4. Not only was I off by $4, I told you it would go up and it went down. That's not too bad, but that's something, as opposed to taking one where it's actually, let's go take a look. So I try to maximize the percentage points that I was off on my forecast, and whichever one shows the worst accuracy is the one that I'm going to show you. So I am showing you basically my worst guess. I will always show you my worst guess. So if you were to pick a spec based off of a forecast I showed you that day, and told you that it was going to hit exactly I told you it would hit 18.6, and it's actually at 19, I was wrong. Like, yes, this did better, but I was still wrong, and I'm going to show that to you. And I've sorted it here, and you guys can play with these filters, obviously, and really check out my worst. But I wanted to show you, I said with a very high degree of confidence, A tier, very high degree of confidence, that this card would go from 16 to 18.6. But I was off 12%. That's kind of bad. So right here, Xantia shows up again. I said it would go from $3 to 4.6. It went up to 7. So I was off by 52% that day. So this example and this example work in my favor, but Obero shows the inverse. I said it would go from 52 to 56. It's actually at 50. So that's not good. So I want to show you guys the worst possible outcome in terms of being accurate to what I told you it would be, whether it's up or down. If you guys want to dig into it, I'm sure you could find. I could also provide another slide to narrow in on the successes or failures. I just wanted to show you guys basically, ideally this classification, this tier column will show you, should show you reduced error. Of course, Xantia is a large exception, but basically my model was very confident it would go up. It did. It just did not expect the degree to which it would recover at this time. So that is kind of fascinating. I think that might be a limitation of the historical data, or I'm not quite sure, and I'm not ashamed to admit that, but it's fascinating. It would be something that I'd want to put more interest into. But all of this, I think, is really fascinating. So Crucible of Worlds, I told you one day that it would go from 22 to 26, and today it's still at 22. So that's a dead one. And that's one that I gave an A tier, and I'm going to show you basically I was off by 16% on that one. I said it would go up $4 and it didn't. So that's on me. You know, take it with a grain of salt. And the way that I would recommend kind of checking out this forecast performance, it would be to look day over day. Basically, if I'm consistently off on a particular card and you're seeing it in these pages day over day, basically my model, for whatever reason, is not very good at predicting that card. And that's something you might want to take into account. And on others, it's predicting an increase, but it's not keeping up. So there is still a level of analysis on the reader side, which I think this slide really allows to kind of shine through. So I believe that's all I kind of want to talk about with these slides. If anybody would like to kind of check out the source code on this, feel free to message me. I have this all up on my Git for anybody who wants to see. I would love if somebody were to create something better than this. I did this was all written in R, so a bit of a boomer language, as I've been told, but if anybody else wants to contribute, help out, beat it, or just wants to use it to kind of formulate their own methodologies, if you can understand it, I'd be ecstatic to have a conversation with you. But yeah, that's it. I will just kind of pop off again by saying this is Wolf of Tin Street. Over at mtgband.com. You guys can also find me at Twitter at Wolf of Tin Street, which is actually where I'll probably be posting this. You guys can probably find me on pretty much any MTG Finance Discord that can have me. I really love working on this stuff. I think this is incredibly cool. I think it's a lot of fun to basically just be able to see how accurate I can get it. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Cheers, guys.